Hi guys, welcome back to Coffee with the Authors. Today we're going to have a little, story time with Mark, I guess. I was giving a book talk in front of a pretty good crowd in the Illinois area recently, and somebody asked me a question I'd never gotten before, which was, when did you decide to become a musician? And which is interesting because as they're asking the question, I'm thinking, when did you decide to become a writer? And I'm kind of formulating an answer, and then the last word was musician instead of writer, and it went, oh wow. And it actually, I was really glad for the question because it brought something up to me that I hadn't thought about in years, which is I actually do know kind of the instant that I first got the desire to become a musician. But it wasn't even an intellectual thing. It was a very visceral, emotional thing, and I was 3 years old probably. I was in my hometown, and my family and I were watching a parade go by, and I was sitting on my dad's shoulder. My dad had picked me up and hoisted me on my shoulder, and as the parade went by, there was a marching band, and there was a drum corps, just a bunch of drummers marching by, and as they went by, they played, and it was so loud and so powerful. It literally shook my chest. It was like watching a rocket launch or something. It kind of shook my chest, and it did something to me inside. And I kind of thought, wow, I want that. Whatever that is, all that, just that raw power, that horsepower and that volume and the energy. I really want that. Somehow, something about that was just so attractive to me. And I think that kind of set me on the course for being a drummer, was that simple little early kind of peak experience that happened to me. The reason I'm bringing this up is that I think these things are important in writing, in that they say write what you know, which can be really confusing because unless we want to write a whole bunch of autobiographies over and over and over, we have to write about people that aren't us, doing things that we've never done, sometimes in situations we haven't been in, and sometimes living in parts of the country or the world that we've never lived in. So is that writing what you know? Well, it can be if you do it correctly. And I think the correct way to do it is to write what you have emotional experience with. And then take your experience, those early peak experiences, and morph them to fit the actual story. So what if I wanted to write a story about a young man who grows up he's kind of a grease monkey, and he grows up being a racer, an automobile racer or a motorcycle racer or whatever. And I would take my early experience watching that drum corps, that marching band go by really loud, and just how I was like stunned in a good way. I would take that experience and put this person, a young dude, or maybe it's a young girl, and they're with their parent at the racetrack, and they're right up against the rail, and the cars go thundering by, and you can smell the burning tires, and you can smell all the gasoline in the air, or the nitro, whatever fuel they're burning, and the dust in the air, and the people yelling, and these huge machines just thundering by. And it grips this young person. It's just like, holy cow, whatever that is, I want that. And then you flash forward 10 or 15 years, and they're a race driver. And you can make that feel authentic, even if you've never been behind the wheel of a race car. You can make that feel authentic by putting your authentic feelings about some other situation into that. So really, that whole write what you know thing, when you think about it, it's just, what have you experienced, and how can you translate that experience into your character's experience, so that even though the specifics are different, at the core, they have the same emotional component at the very core of this. It would be hard to write about someone who falling in love, and then maybe falling in love and having it fall apart. I don't know. It'd be hard to write about that if you've never been in love, for example. But you don't have to have been in love the same way the character in the book is in love. You just have to have had something very, very important to you that you dedicated you felt very passionate about it, and you kind of dedicated your life to, and then maybe losing that. And you can feed that into any number of situations. Think back to when you were a kid. Think back to the first time You were by yourself. The first time your parents left you behind somewhere. The first time you felt embarrassed in front of a crowd of people for whatever reason. The first time you looked at someone else and thought, oh, wow, I really like that person. The first time you tried a new experience and thought, this is amazing. Whether that's your first slice of pizza, or your neighbor has a really awesome dog that you get to wrestle with, or that you go to a museum and see some amazing works of art, whatever it is, we all have these experiences, and they're actually kind of bigger for us when we're younger because they're largely firsts, right? When you're an adult, you have experiences, but they're piled on top of hundreds or thousands of other experiences. And each one of them is a smaller bit of the puzzle. But when we're young and we have that very first, whatever it is, man, it really, really, really impacts us. I don't like to tell people what to do, but I would consider maybe thinking about applying those to your work, those things that really affected you emotionally, and you can totally morph them. You can totally morph the situation. You had a dog when you were a kid, and then the dog got sick and died or something terrible like that, and you remember that feeling. You can use that same emotion in a fantasy novel about someone who has a dragon that's very important to them. You know what I'm saying? In other words, the specifics don't matter at all. It's all about the emotional core, and that you want the emotion to be authentic. And if the emotion is authentic, even if the setting is completely unrealistic, if it's a fantasy setting or a science fiction setting or historical and it's set 500 years ago, all of that can still work and feel very real to the reader, as long as the actual emotion at the core feels real, because we all have these things in common that we've experienced, individually, but kind of as a group, we've all experienced these certain wonderful things and terrible things that happen during our lives. And you can use that to kind of bridge the gap between you and the reader, because the specifics of your life, the reader is a different person. They probably don't look or act like you, and they probably don't live where you live or anything else. They have different experiences, yet we all have similar early kind of watershed emotional events that have happened to us, and we can connect through that. Okay, that's my story time. Thank you very much. Keep writing.